Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the command center of Seoul Defense Station, watching the massive alien ship appear on her screens. The ship was beautiful in a cold way, all smooth curves and glowing blue lights. It was also the size of a small city. "Ma'am, they're sending a message," Lieutenant Rodriguez said from his station. His voice was tight with worry. "Put it through," Sarah said. She had been expecting this day for 20 years. The main screen flickered, and an alien face appeared. It looked like a mix between a lizard and a bird, with scales that changed color and eyes that never blinked. When it spoke, the translation system made its voice sound flat and emotionless. "Humans of Earth," the alien said. "I am High Commander Vextar of the Galactic Confederation. We have watched your species for 50 of your years. We have seen your wars, your violence, your chaos. You are a danger to the peaceful galaxy." Sarah crossed her arms, but said nothing. She had heard this speech before in training simulations. "You have 72 of your hours to surrender completely," Vextar continued. "You will give up all weapons. You will accept Confederation rule. You will stop your dangerous ways. If you refuse, we will make you peaceful by force." The transmission ended. The command center was quiet for a moment. Then Lieutenant Rodriguez started laughing. "Did he just threaten us?" Rodriguez asked, still chuckling. "Did a lizard bird just tell humans to stop being dangerous?" Sarah smiled. It was not a nice smile. "Yes, he did. Send the standard response." Rodriguez typed quickly. On screens across Earth, the same message appeared. "The Galactic Confederation has declared war on humanity. This is not a drill. Operation Sleeping Giant is now active." Around the world, things began to happen very quickly. In underground bunkers that had been secret for decades, massive machines hummed to life. On the moon's hidden side, metal covers slid away from enormous gun barrels. In the asteroid belt, mining ships suddenly revealed their true purpose as they opened weapon bays. In Tokyo, Dr. Kenji Nakamura looked at his life's work. Project Prometheus was ready. The small device on his desk looked harmless, but it would change everything. "Sir?" his assistant asked. "Should we activate it?" "Not yet," Kenji said. "Let them come closer first." Meanwhile, in military bases around Earth, something unexpected was happening. Instead of panic, there was excitement. Soldiers who had trained their whole lives for this moment were finally getting their chance. Captain Mike Torres had been waiting in the Mars Defense Force for 15 years. When the alert came through, he actually whooped with joy. "Finally!" he shouted to his crew. "Boys, we've been playing defense for too long. Time to show these aliens what humans do best." His gunner, Sergeant Kim, was already checking their weapons. "Sir, all systems green. We've got full loads of kinetic rounds and those new plasma charges from the secret lab." "Good," Torres said. "And Kim, make sure to record everything. I want the folks back home to see this." On Earth's surface, something else was happening that the aliens had not expected. Instead of hiding, people were celebrating. In New York, crowds gathered in Times Square, cheering and singing war songs. In London, pubs filled with volunteers ready to join the fight. In Moscow, old veterans came out of retirement, smiling for the first time in years. The alien observers, hidden in their spy ships, sent confused reports back to the Confederation fleet. "The humans are not acting as predicted," one report said. "They show no fear. They appear to be happy about the war declaration." High Commander Vextar read these reports with growing unease. In his experience, species either surrendered immediately or fought desperately. They did not throw parties. "Perhaps they do not understand," he told his staff. "Send another message. Make it clear what will happen." The second message was broadcast to every device on Earth. "Humans," Vextar's voice said, "you do not seem to understand. We have conquered 12 species. Our technology is far beyond yours. Our ships number in the thousands. You have one small planet and some primitive colonies. Surrender now or be destroyed." This time, Earth's response was different. Instead of Admiral Chen, the answer came from General Jackson, the head of Earth Defense Force. He was an old man with scars on his face and eyes that had seen too many battles. "Unknown alien commander," Jackson said. "Thank you for the warning. We have been ready for you for a very long time. Come and take our planet if you can. We'll be waiting." Then Jackson did something that made alien observers freeze in shock. He smiled. Around the solar system, human preparations kicked into high gear. The asteroid belt mining operation revealed its true nature. What the aliens thought were simple rock breakers were actually mass drivers, machines that could throw rocks at incredible speed. Each asteroid miner could now launch house-sized projectiles at enemy ships. On Europa, the ice processing plants opened up to show massive missile silos. On Titan, gas collecting platforms turned out to be fuel depots for the biggest fleet of warships humanity had ever built. The aliens had been watching humanity for 50 years, but they had only seen what humans wanted them to see. In the deepest bunkers on Earth, old weapons were brought out of storage. Weapons that human scientists had built but never used. Weapons that had been too dangerous to test properly. The kind of weapons that other species would never think to build because they were too risky. Humans had built them anyway. Sarah Chen walked through the corridors of Seoul Defense Station, checking on her people. Everyone was busy, but everyone was smiling. In 50 years of preparing for this day, one thing had become very clear. Humans were really, really good at preparing for war. "Admiral," her science officer called out, "we're getting readings from the alien fleet. They're moving into formation." "How long until they reach Earth?" Sarah asked. 18 hours, ma'am." Sarah nodded. "Perfect. That gives us time to make sure everything is ready." She looked out at the stars through the station's main window. Somewhere out there, an alien fleet was coming to conquer humanity. They thought they were facing a primitive, chaotic species that would be easy to defeat. They were about to learn why humans had conquered their own planet, survived ice ages, and built cities among the stars. They were about to learn why every human child grew up hearing stories about David and Goliath, about underdog victories, about never giving up. Most importantly, they were about to learn why humans called themselves the descendants of persistence, hunters. The kind of hunters who never stopped chasing their prey. The kind of hunters who turned being hunted into a game. The aliens thought they were bringing war to a peaceful species. They were wrong. Humanity had been preparing for this war. Since the day they first looked up at the stars and wondered what was out there, they had spent 50 years getting ready for someone to finally give them a real challenge. As Sarah Chen looked out at the approaching alien fleet, she felt something she had not felt in years. She felt grateful. Finally, after decades of peace, humanity was going to get to do what it did best. The galaxy was about to meet Earth, and Earth was ready to introduce itself properly. Captain Zixtar of the Hegemony Third Fleet had conquered 4 species in his lifetime. He knew how these things worked. The enemy would position their ships in defensive formations. They would try to protect their important targets. They would fight bravely but predictably until they realized they could not win. Humans, it seemed, had not read the manual on how to lose properly. "Sir," his sensor operator reported, "the human ships are moving into attack position." Zixtar looked at his. Displays with confusion. The human fleet was not forming a defensive line around Earth. Instead, their ships were spreading out across the solar system in what looked like random positions. "Are they retreating?" he asked. "No, sir. They appear to be surrounding us." This made no sense. The Confederation fleet had over 2,000 ships. According to their intelligence, humanity had maybe 300 combat vessels. How could they surround a larger force? "Begin the attack," Zixtar ordered. "Target their largest ships first." The Confederation fleet moved forward in perfect formation, just as they had been trained. Their plasma cannons charged up, ready to destroy the primitive human vessels. Then the asteroid started moving. At first, Zixtar thought his sensors were broken. Large rocks throughout the asteroid belt were accelerating toward his fleet, not falling, accelerating under power. "Sir!" his weapons officer shouted. "Those asteroids have engines!" Zixtar watched in growing horror as hundreds of massive rocks began flying toward his ships. Each asteroid was the size of a building and moving at incredible speed. "Evasive maneuvers," he ordered. But the Confederation ships were not built for quick turns. They were designed for straight-line combat against other organized fleets. As the first asteroids reached them, 3 ships disappeared in explosions of metal and plasma. Then the human ships attacked. Captain Torres in his Mars Defense Corvette came screaming out of nowhere, his ship spinning like a drill as it fired every weapon it had. Behind him, a dozen more human ships followed, each one flying in a completely different pattern. "What are they doing?" Zixtar's tactical officer asked. The humans were not following any formation Zixtar recognized. Some ships flew straight, at the enemy, guns blazing. Others came in spirals, firing and then disappearing behind cover. A few were actually ramming damaged Confederation vessels, using their own ships as weapons. Worst of all, the humans were broadcasting on open channels, and they were laughing. "Yahoo!" came one voice. "Did you see that shot, Jenny?" "Right through." "Their bridge!" "Nice flying, Mike!" Another voice answered. "But watch this!" A human ship suddenly accelerated directly toward Zixtar's flagship. He watched in disbelief as the tiny vessel opened fire with weapons that should not have fit on such a small ship. "How are they carrying plasma cannons on a corvette?" His engineer asked. "Sir," the communications officer reported, "they're sending us a message." "Put it through," Zixtar said. A human face appeared on screen. The man was young, with a big grin and wild eyes. Behind him, his bridge was on fire, but he did not seem to care. "Hey there, lizard boy," the human said cheerfully. "Thanks for the target practice. We've been waiting 50 years for someone to shoot at." The transmission cut off as the human ship exploded. But somehow, Zixtar felt like the human had won that exchange. All around the solar system, the battle was going wrong in ways Zixtar had never imagined. The humans were not just fighting, they were improvising. When their weapons failed, they used their ships as missiles. When their ships were damaged, they used the debris as weapons. On Europa, what the Confederation had thought were ice mining facilities turned out to be massive missile silos. Hundreds of rockets launched from the moon's surface, each one painted with colorful designs and human writing. "What do those symbols mean?" Zixtar asked his intelligence officer. "According to our files, they are human flags, symbols of their old tribal groups. This one says Texas. This one says Japan. This one just says Earth or death." The missiles hit the Confederation's second wave just as they entered the outer solar system. But these were not normal missiles. They were controlled by artificial intelligence, and they fought like tiny human pilots. The AI missiles dodged return fire, worked together in groups, and seemed to take joy in destroying their targets. One missile actually performed a loop before hitting its target, as if it was showing off. "Sir," the sensor operator reported, "we've lost 40% of our fleet." Zixtar could not believe it. In 2 hours of combat, a smaller human force had destroyed nearly half of his ships. How was this possible? Then he realized the truth. The humans were not fighting like any species he had ever encountered. Every other race in the galaxy had evolved the same way. They had become either predators or prey. Predators fought in organized groups with clear hierarchies. Prey fought desperately but predictably. Humans fought like something else entirely. They fought like they enjoyed it. "New contacts!" the sensor operator called out. "Human reinforcements coming from the outer planets!" Zixtar looked at his screen and felt his blood freeze. The new human ships were enormous. Each one was the size of a space station, and they were moving fast. "Those are not warships," his intelligence officer said, checking the files. "Those are supposed to be cargo vessels." As the huge ships got closer, they opened up like flowers. Each cargo ship revealed hundreds of smaller vessels inside, but these were not normal fighters. They were construction mechs, mining equipment, and even civilian ships, all armed with improvised weapons. A voice came over the communications channel. This time it was an older human, speaking calmly. "Confederation Fleet, this is General Jackson of Earth Defense Force. You have entered our home system uninvited. You have threatened our families. You have declared war on humanity." The voice paused, and Zixtar heard something that chilled him. The sound of thousands of humans cheering in the background. "We accept your declaration of war," General Jackson continued. "Welcome to Sol System. Enjoy your stay." What happened next broke every rule of space combat that Zixtar knew. The humans did not just attack, they swarmed. Small ships came from every direction, moving in patterns that made no sense. Some ships worked together like a pack. Others fought alone like berserkers. A few even seemed to be competing with each other to see who could destroy more enemy vessels. Zixtar watched one human pilot use his damaged ship's engine as a weapon, ramming 3 Confederation vessels before his ship finally broke apart. As his ship died, the pilot's last transmission was laughter. All ships, Zixtar ordered. Retreat to minimum safe distance. We need to regroup. But as his fleet tried to pull back, they discovered something terrible. The humans had been hurting them. All those random attacks, all that chaotic fighting. It had been pushing the Confederation fleet into a trap. They were now surrounded by the very asteroids they had been trying to avoid. And each asteroid was covered in human weapons. "Sir," his communications officer said quietly, "we're receiving another transmission from Earth." This time, it was Admiral Chen. She was standing on the bridge of a ship that looked like it had been built for ramming. Behind her, Zixtar could see human crew members making preparations for more fighting. "Confederation fleet," she said. "You came here to make us peaceful. You wanted to show us how civilized species behave. Well, we've got news for you." She smiled, and it was not a friendly smile. Humans become very peaceful after we win our wars, and we always win our wars. So if you want to see us peaceful, you're going to have to wait until we're done being dangerous. The transmission ended, and Zixtar realized something that terrified him. The humans were just getting started. 3 months after the first battle, Supreme Commander HFY of the Confederation Council received reports that made no sense. "The humans are attacking our supply lines," his aide reported. "But they are not taking territory. They are studying us." HFY looked at the battle reports spread across his desk. Each one told the same impossible story. Human forces would attack a Confederation position, fight for a few hours, then disappear. But before they left, they would capture prisoners, take samples of technology, and record everything. "What do you mean, studying us?" HFY asked. "They are learning how each of our species fights," the aide explained. "When they attack Kythera positions, they use different tactics than when they attack Zephyrian positions. It is as if they have figured out how to fight each of us separately." This was disturbing news. The Confederation's strength came from the fact that 12 different species worked together. Each species had different abilities, different technologies, different ways of thinking. No enemy had ever been able to handle all 12 at once. Humans, it seemed, were treating each species like a separate puzzle to solve. On the planet Kythera Prime, General Saxton was discovering this firsthand. The Kythera were proud of their perfect military formations. Their soldiers moved like dancers, each one knowing exactly where the others would be. They had never lost a battle because their coordination was flawless. Then the humans arrived. "Sir," Lieutenant Vexara reported, "human ships are approaching from 7 directions at once." General Saxton smiled. "Excellent. Form the sacred triangle formation. We will show these chaotic humans what true military precision looks like." The Kythera fleet moved into their traditional formation, a perfect triangle with each ship exactly where it should be. It was beautiful, efficient, and had never failed them. The humans attacked by doing everything wrong. Instead of focusing their fire on one point, human ships attacked from all directions at random times. Instead of maintaining formation, each human ship seemed to be fighting its own private war. Some ships flew in circles, others attacked and then retreated for no reason. A few actually rammed each other by accident and kept fighting anyway. It was the most chaotic, disorganized, unprofessional military attack General Saxton had ever seen. It was also completely unstoppable. The Kythera formation depended on each ship knowing where the others would be. But when human ships kept moving randomly, appearing and disappearing without any pattern, the formation began to break down. Kythera ships started running into each other, trying to maintain their positions. Within an hour, the perfect sacred triangle had become a confused mess of ships flying in circles, trying to find their proper places in a formation that no longer existed. "Sir," Lieutenant Vexara said, "the humans are broadcasting a message." On the main screen, a human woman appeared. She was sitting in what looked like a destroyed ship's bridge, eating something from a small container. "Hey there, Kythera folks," she said cheerfully between bites. "Nice formation you had there. Very pretty. We've got some suggestions for improvements, though. First, maybe don't put all your ships in predictable patterns. Second, try being more flexible. Third, here's a human saying you might want to learn. No plan survives contact with the enemy." She took another bite of her food. "Oh, and by the way, that wasn't actually our attack. That was just us learning how you fight. The real attack starts now." What followed was nothing like the first chaotic assault. This time, the humans moved with purpose. They had studied how Kythera formations worked, and now they attacked each ship in exactly the right way to cause maximum confusion to the others. Within 2 hours, the entire Kythera fleet was retreating. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. On Zephyrian Prime, the logical, computer-minded, Zephyrians found themselves facing human tactics that made no logical sense at all. Human ships would attack, retreat, attack again, then stop fighting completely to broadcast strange human music before attacking once more. The Zephyrian battle computers, trying to predict human behavior, crashed from overload. They are not following any logical pattern, Chief Calculator Zix Ara reported to his commander. Their actions appear random, but they are clearly planned. It is impossible. Run more calculations, Commander Nexthor ordered. Sir, Zixara said quietly. We have been running calculations for 6 weeks. The computers have concluded that humans do not calculate at all. They just do things. This was deeply disturbing to the Zephyrians, who had never encountered a species that could be intelligent without being logical. But the worst part was not the military defeats. The worst part was what happened after the humans won their battles. Instead of enslaving the defeated aliens or destroying their worlds, humans did something unprecedented in galactic history. They started talking to them on Tylera Station, which had surrendered to human forces after a 3-day siege. Captain Maria Santos walked into what used to be the Confederation Command Center. Sitting at the main desk was a Tylerian officer who looked like a cross between a cat and a spider. I am Commander Klextep, the alien said stiffly. I formally surrender this station to human forces. Maria nodded and sat down across from him. Thanks. I'm Captain Santos. Mind if I ask you something? The alien looked confused. Ask me something? Yeah. Why did you join the Confederation in the first place? Commander Klextep stared at her. In his entire military career, no one had ever asked him a question like that. We were conquered, he said slowly. 50 years ago. We had no choice. Okay, Maria said. And how has that worked out for you? This was even more confusing. What do you mean? I mean, are you happy? Do you like being part of the Confederation? Do they treat you well? Commander Klextep had never been asked if he was happy. The concept was foreign to him. I do not understand, he said. Maria leaned back in her chair. Look, we humans have this crazy idea. We think people should get to choose their own government. We think everyone deserves to be treated fairly. We think wars should end with everybody being friends afterward. She pulled out a small device and placed it on the desk. This is a universal translator and cultural database. It has information about human government, human rights, human history. Take a look when you get a chance. Why are you giving this to me? Commander Klextep asked. Because, Maria said, we didn't come here to conquer you. We came here to give you options. Similar conversations were happening on dozens of worlds. Human forces were not behaving like conquerors. They were behaving like liberators who genuinely wanted to know if the people they had liberated actually wanted to be liberated. The results were disturbing to the Confederation leadership. Species that had been loyal members for decades started asking questions they had never asked before. Questions like, why don't we get to vote on Confederation policies? And why are humans treating prisoners better than our own government treats citizens? On Earth, Dr. Kenji Nakamura watched reports from across the galaxy with satisfaction. Project Prometheus was working exactly as planned. Sir, his assistant said, we're getting requests for more cultural database units. Apparently alien populations are sharing them with each other. Kenji smiled. Good. How many requests? 12 million so far. And growing. Kenji nodded. Humans had learned something important during their own history. You could not conquer an idea. You could not destroy hope. And you definitely could not stop people from talking to each other once they started asking the right questions. The Confederation had started a war to keep humanity from spreading their dangerous ideas. They were about to discover that war was the perfect way to spread ideas very, very quickly. All across the galaxy, species that had never questioned authority were suddenly wondering why they had never been allowed to ask questions. Species that had accepted their place in the galactic order were suddenly curious about what other possibilities might exist, and humanity was more than happy to show them. The war was far from over, but already the galaxy was starting to change in ways that the Confederation had never imagined possible. The humans were not just winning battles, they were winning hearts and minds, and that was much more dangerous than any weapon. 6 months into the war, High Counselor Zefrak of the Galactic Confederation faced the worst crisis in the organization's 1,000-year history. The reports on his desk painted a picture that should have been impossible. 3 more species have requested to switch sides, his aide reported. The Tylarian Empire wants to join the Human Alliance. The Cathara Collective is asking for human protection. And the Vorthak clans are demanding we explain why humans treat their prisoners better than we treat our own citizens. Zefrak felt his head spines droop with exhaustion. How many ships have we lost this week? 437, sir. But that is not the worst part. What could be worse than losing nearly 500 ships? The aide hesitated. Sir, 60 of those ships were destroyed by their own crews. They mutinied rather than fight the humans. This was madness. In the Confederation's entire history, no member species had ever mutinied against their own command structure. But now, it was happening daily. What are the humans doing to cause this? Zefrak demanded. They are talking to our people, sir. On the planet Kythera Prime, Commander Vexara sat in his cell reading something that should not have existed. It was a human document called the Universal Declaration of Rights. According to this paper, all intelligent beings had certain privileges that could never be taken away. The right to speak freely, the right to choose their leaders, the right to be treated fairly under the law, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Commander Vexara had never heard of most of these concepts. It is interesting reading, yes? Asked a voice from the next cell. Vexara looked over to see Captain Torres, the human pilot who had been captured during the last battle. The human was sitting calmly, as if being in prison was no big concern. These rights you speak of, Vexara said slowly. Do all humans really have them? Torres nodded. Every single one, even the ones we disagree with, even the ones we don't like. That's kind of the point. But how does your society function without strict order? Without everyone knowing their proper place? Torres laughed. Buddy, humans figured out something important a long time ago. People work harder and fight better when they choose to do it, not when they're forced to do it. This was a concept that Vexara's mind could barely grasp. In Kythera society, everyone was born into a specific role and stayed there their entire lives. The idea that someone could choose their own path was revolutionary. Tell me more about this democracy, Vexara said. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, similar conversations were happening everywhere humans and aliens came into contact. Human prisoners were teaching their guards about freedom. Human diplomats were explaining voting to confused alien leaders. Human traders were sharing stories about human history with anyone who would listen. The Confederation had expected humans to try to conquer territory. Instead, humans were conquering minds. On the mining world of Crucis 7, something unprecedented happened. The Tylarian workers, inspired by human broadcasts about workers' rights, went on strike. They demanded better conditions, fair pay, and the right to form unions. Governor Meshtar was completely unprepared for this. Strikes were not something that existed in Confederation space. What do they want? He asked his security chief. They want to be treated like the humans treat their workers, sir. They want contracts that they can read. They want safety equipment. They want days off to rest. Governor Meshtar was horrified. These are ridiculous demands. Workers do not make demands. Sir, the security chief said quietly, they are quoting human law to us. They know more about workers' rights than we do. This was the terrifying truth that the Confederation was discovering. Humans had spent thousands of years fighting for the rights that they now took for granted. They had made every mistake, fought every battle, and learned every lesson that a society could learn about freedom and justice. And now they were sharing all of that knowledge with anyone who wanted it. The results were catastrophic for the authoritarian Confederation government. On Zephyrian Prime, the logical computer minds that ran society faced their first paradox that could not be calculated. Citizens were asking questions that had no mathematical answers. Why do the council members get better food rations than workers? One citizen asked. The optimal distribution of resources requires hierarchical allocation, the computer answered, as it had been programmed to do. But humans say all people should be equal, the citizen replied. If we are all equally intelligent, why are we not equally valuable? The computer crashed trying to process this question. Similar breakdowns were happening everywhere. Alien societies that had run smoothly for centuries were suddenly faced with citizens who had learned new words like equality, democracy, and freedom. But the humans were not finished. Dr. Kenji Nakamura's Project Prometheus had a second phase. Begin broadcasting human entertainment, he ordered. Across the galaxy, alien populations suddenly gained access to human movies, music, books, and games. For species that had lived under strict government control, this was like opening a window into a completely different world. Tylerian children watched human cartoons and learned about friendship, courage, and standing up for what was right. Kithara adults listened to human music and discovered emotions they had never been allowed to express. Zephyrian teenagers played human video games and experienced the joy of making choices just for fun. The cultural impact was immediate and devastating. To Confederation control. Sir, reported Admiral Klexivar to High Counselor Zephyrock, our own ships are requesting human entertainment broadcasts. The crews say it improves morale. Zephyrock felt his world crumbling around him. Deny all requests. Human culture is dangerous propaganda. Sir, it may be too late for that. We intercepted a message from one of our patrol ships yesterday. The crew was singing human songs. This was the final horror. Confederation military personnel were adopting human culture voluntarily. The truth was that humans had weaponized something that the Confederation had never considered dangerous. Hope. For 1,000 years, the member species of the Confederation had accepted their roles because they had never imagined anything different was possible. They worked in assigned jobs because they had never heard of choosing careers. They followed orders because they had never learned they could ask questions. Humans had shown them that other ways of life existed, and once people learned that change was possible, it became very difficult to stop them from wanting change. On the front lines of the war, human commanders noticed that fewer and fewer enemy ships were fighting with real determination. Many alien crews seemed to be going through the motions, more interested in talking than shooting. Admiral, reported Captain Santos from the bridge of her cruiser, the Tylerian fleet is requesting another truce for cultural exchange. Admiral Chen smiled. Grant it, and make sure our people have plenty of those democracy pamphlets ready. The war was becoming something that had never happened in galactic history. It was becoming a war of ideas, and humanity was winning by convincing their enemies to stop being enemies. But the Confederation leadership was not ready to give up. If they could not win by military force, and they could not stop the spread of human ideas, they would try something desperate. High Counselor Zephyrock made a decision that would change everything. Contact the Drakkar Empire, he ordered. Tell them we are prepared to accept their terms. The Drakkar were not members of the Confederation. They were something much worse. They were the species that even the Confederation feared, a warrior race that had conquered half the galaxy before mysteriously stopping their expansion. If the Confederation could not defeat humanity, perhaps the Drakkar could. But Zephyrock did not know that humans had been expecting this move. They had been preparing for the possibility that their enemies would call in reinforcements, and humanity's response to the threat of the Drakkar would surprise everyone, including themselves. The galaxy was about to discover that humans had one more lesson to teach. When the stakes got higher, humans did not get more desperate. They got more creative. The Drakkar war fleet emerged from hyperspace like a storm made of metal and death. Each ship was the size of a city, covered in weapons that could crack planets. For 500 years, the Drakkar had been the nightmare that kept other species awake at night. Emperor Vashitok the Destroyer stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking at the small blue planet that had caused so much trouble. Earth looked peaceful and harmless. That would make destroying it more satisfying. Communications, he growled. Send the standard surrender demand. Yes, my lord, his communications officer replied. Standard planetary destruction countdown? No, Vashtok said. Give them 1 hour. I want them to have time to be afraid. But when the human response came, it was not what anyone expected. The transmission showed a conference room full of humans. At the head of the table sat an elderly woman with gray hair and kind eyes. She looked like someone's grandmother. "Greetings, Drakkar Fleet," she said politely. "I am President Martinez of the United Earth Government. We received your ultimatum, and we have a counter-proposal." Emperor Vashtok laughed. No species had ever made a counter-proposal to the Drakkar. "We propose a peaceful resolution to this conflict," President Martinez continued. "We would like to invite you to participate in what we humans call negotiations." This was completely unprecedented. Vashtok had conquered 47 species, and none of them had ever suggested talking. Furthermore, the human president said, "We would like to share some information about your current allies, the Galactic Confederation. We think you might find it interesting." What followed was something that shook the Drakkar to their core. The humans presented evidence, recordings, documents, intercepted communications that showed how the Confederation really operated. They showed Drakkar leaders how the Confederation treated their own member species, how they suppressed freedom, crushed dissent, and kept entire populations in poverty while their leaders lived in luxury. "We know that your people value strength and honor," President Martinez said. "We ask you, is there honor in helping tyrants oppress the weak?" Emperor Vashtok felt something he had not experienced in decades: doubt. But before he could respond, another transmission came through. This one was from High Counselor Zephyrak of the Confederation. "Drakkar Emperor," Zephyrak said urgently, "do not listen to human lies. Destroy them now, before their poison spreads to your people." President Martinez smiled sadly. "Your Honor, we are not asking you to take our word for anything. We are simply asking you to talk to your own allies. Ask the Confederation leadership how they treat their own citizens. Ask them about freedom, democracy, workers' rights. Ask them if their people are happy." She paused, then added, "And then ask yourself, when was the last time someone asked if your people are happy?" This question hit Emperor Vashtok like a physical blow. In 500 years of ruling the Drakkar Empire, he had never once asked if his people were happy. It had never occurred to him that it mattered. "My lord," his communications officer said quietly, "we are receiving thousands of transmissions from across the galaxy. Species that were conquered by the humans are asking to speak with us." "Put them through," Vashtok ordered. What followed was a series of conversations that changed everything. Tylarian leaders spoke about their newfound freedom under human protection. Kythera commanders talked about learning to think for themselves instead of just following orders. Zephyrian citizens described the joy of making their own choices. Most shocking of all, former Confederation military officers spoke about what it was like to serve under leaders who actually cared about their welfare. "The humans do not rule us," explained former Commander Vexara, who now wore the uniform of the Terran Accord. "They work with us. They ask our opinions. They listen when we speak. It is what I always thought leadership should be." Emperor Vashtok turned to his own officers. For the first time in his life, he really looked at them. They were tired, he realized. They had been fighting and conquering for so long that they had forgotten why they were doing it. "Tactical officer," he said slowly, "do you enjoy our constant wars?" The officer looked startled. "My lord?" "I am asking for your honest opinion. Do you enjoy fighting all the time? Do you want to spend your life conquering other species?" The tactical officer was silent for a long moment. Finally, he spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "No, my lord. I have not seen my family in 3 years. I am tired of war." Emperor Vashtok looked around his bridge. Every officer looked. The same, exhausted, worn down by endless conflict. "Communications," he ordered. "Open a channel to the human fleet." When the connection was established, President Martinez appeared on screen again, still looking like a kindly grandmother. "Yes, Your Honor," she said politely. "Human President," Vashtok said. "You offer negotiations. What exactly are you proposing?" "President," Martinez smiled. "We propose something that has never been tried in galactic history. We propose that all the intelligent species in the galaxy work together as equals. No empires, no conquered worlds, no rulers and subjects, just neighbors helping neighbors. And if we refuse, Vashatok asked. Then we will fight you, President Martinez said simply. And we will win, because we always win. But we would much rather be your friends. Emperor Vashatok was quiet for a long time. Around the galaxy, millions of beings watched and waited to see what the most feared warrior in galactic history would decide. Finally, he spoke. Human President, I have been a conqueror for 500 years. I have never tried being a friend. Perhaps it is time to learn something new. What happened next became known as the Miracle of Sol. The most powerful military forces in the galaxy, the Drakkar War Fleet, the remaining Confederation ships and the human defense forces, all powered down their weapons and began to talk. The negotiations took 6 months. There were arguments, disagreements, and moments when it seemed like fighting would begin again. But slowly, painfully, something beautiful began to emerge. The Terran Accord was not like any government that had ever existed. It was based on principles that humans had spent thousands of years learning, that all intelligent beings had rights that could not be taken away, that governments existed to serve people rather than rule them, and that differences of opinion made societies stronger, not weaker. Species that had been enemies for centuries began working together. The Kithera's organizational skills combined with Tylarian engineering and Zephyrian logic to create wonders that none of them could have achieved alone. The Drakkar, to everyone's surprise, became the Accord's greatest defenders. They had spent so long conquering that they had forgotten how good it felt to protect something worthwhile. Admiral Chen stood on the observation deck of New Geneva Station, watching children from a dozen different species play together in the park below. Kithera. Children taught human children their coordination games. Human children taught Tylarian children about imagination. Drakkar cubs learned gentleness from Zephyrian youth. Admiral, said Captain Santos, joining her at the window, the last Confederation holdout worlds just voted to join the Accord. The transition is complete. Chen nodded, but she was thinking about something else. A young Drakkar cadet had asked her a question earlier that day. Why did humans seem so eager for the war to begin? The cadet had asked. Chen had thought about it for hours before answering. The truth was complex but important. We were not eager for war, she had finally said. We were eager to prove something that we had always believed but never had the chance to show. What was that? The cadet asked. That in a galaxy full of species that had forgotten how to dream, how to change, and how to hope? Humanity remembered all three. And we were ready to remind everyone else. Now, watching the children play, Chen knew that the reminder had worked. The galaxy had remembered how to dream of better futures. It had remembered how to change old, unfair ways of doing things. Most importantly, it had remembered how to hope that tomorrow could be better than today. The war was over, but the real victory was just beginning. For the first time in galactic history, every intelligent species had a voice in their own destiny. Every child could grow up to be whatever they chose to be. Every being could speak freely, think freely, and live freely. It had taken a war to teach the galaxy about peace. But humans had always understood something that other species had forgotten. Sometimes you had to fight for the right to stop fighting. The galaxy was finally at peace. But it was not the peace of conquest or submission. It was the peace of friends, working together toward a future that none of them could achieve alone. And in that future, the children playing in the park below would grow up in a galaxy where war was no longer necessary, because everyone had learned the most important human lesson of all. It was always better to make friends than to make enemies, even if you had to win a war first to prove the point.